I think we can maybe give 5 minutes
Yeah, sure,
to
sure.
people
No,
to join. I think we've got only
no issue, no issue.
few
No issue. We have all the time.
few
Oh, yeah.
people are joining. Attendees are joining.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. Sure, sure. No issue.
So we can start. So we can start.
Okay. Is everyone there? Chitrakshi?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Just tell me when you're ready to start. I'll do that.
So we can start.
Okay. Thank you, Chitrakshi, friends and colleagues. It's my privilege to welcome you to the 122nd episode of the webinar series on Rethinking City that INHAF has been running for the past few years. This one is to discuss and present ways and means of making the walled city of Ahmedabad, which has been declared India's first heritage city by UNESCO almost 8 years ago, a place to go to and soak in history. The purpose of this webinar is to examine ideas and making the heritage city, one, a vibrant center for local and international tourism, two, make it a hub for cultural exchange of all kinds, three, see to it that it presents a good lesson in heritage preservation and conservation, and last, a place for enjoyable and healthy living, as the walled city has as many as 4 lakh people living in 600 poles and other forms of settlements. This two-part webinar has some outstanding experts and specialists on the subject. The first one, that is today, moderated by Dr. Jagan Shah, takes place today, and the second one, which is taking place on 2nd April, will be moderated by Debashish Nayak, who has spent a better part of his professional life developing heritage awareness in Ahmedabad. This webinar series, which is appropriately called Rethinking City, is rolling out today, 122nd episode. As many of you know, we have had over 500 experts, professionals, specialists, community groups, and concerned citizens from all over the world presenting their views, perspectives, and solutions on something like 30 to 40 important urban themes such as governance, finance, mobility, climate change, infrastructure, slums, housing, etc. While admitting, and I must do that, a lull in the past few months, we have been slow in organizing webinars where we were off the air, so to speak. Let me share a good news that we are unfolding some 20 new webinars in the coming few months, almost 20. That includes a series of 5 webinars on an incredibly versatile slum improvement project in Orissa, which is showing the way to deal with the slum problem creatively in our cities. What is happening in big cities and small towns of Orissa has such potential for adoption and replication in other cities of the country that we have named the webinar series Slums Are Solvable. The second set of 5 webinars are with CityNet, an association of Asian cities with some 150 members. This webinar series will focus on the climate change issues and share what the big cities of Asia, such as Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Seoul, Yokohama, and Kathmandu are doing to address the formidable climate change they are faced with. The underlying rationale and immediate purpose of this webinar series is to germinate seeds for and contribute to building a societal partnership of multiple stakeholders to prepare for and respond to a difficult urban challenge we are up against. It is based on a deeply felt concern that India's urban challenge is very complex and daunting, and we as people, we as government, we as professionals, we as civil society have not understood its dimensions adequately. And that lack of understanding is reflecting in the quality of cities we have. Whatever we examine, be that urban planning or infrastructure or governance or finance or sustainability or slums or housing, our cities are saddled with difficult problems. And it is clear that meeting India's urban challenge, which I often describe as more demanding than even the climate challenge, is going to require a lot more than what is on offer currently. It appears that various stakeholders operating on their own from their respective vantage points may not be able to do justice to the complexity of the task. What is needed in order to meet this challenge adequately is a collective effort, a wider, multidimensional, multi-focus, multi-layered societal partnership. And this webinar series, which is trying to put multiple dimensions of urban challenge on the public platform, is a very small, very modest effort in that direction. This is a small contribution in putting the idea and the need across to people who matter. There is a long way to go. but we are convinced that nothing less than a wider societal partnership in search of new approaches, strategies, and solutions would do. With this long introduction on what and why of this webinar series, I hand this over to Dr. Jagan Shah and his highly informed and knowledgeable colleague on the panel to conduct the webinar. But give me just one more minute in order to introduce Jagan Bhai. Jagan Shah is a CEO of InfraVision Foundation. As an architect and urbanist with extensive experience in urban policy and practice. He was a former resident senior fellow at Artha Global. As a director of India's National Institute of Urban Affairs, that is NIUA, he co-conceived the Smart Cities mission and expanded its impact. He guided the preparation of the master plan for Delhi 2041 and developed policies for land value capture, land pooling, and transit-oriented development. He was also a resident senior fellow at the IDFC Institute. He has served as director of Shushan School of Art and Architecture and was chief executive of Urban Space Consultants between 2007 and 10. My most important introduction to Jagan Bhai is he's a very close friend and someone I turn to for advice all the time. So thank you, Jagan Bhai, for agreeing to moderate this, and over to all of you for a very interesting, thought-provoking webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti Bhai. And thank you for giving me the privilege of being part of this conversation. It's wonderful to be in this panel discussion with old friends and associates as well. And it's a subject of great interest to me. In fact, I would say that my entry into the urban sector itself was shaped by looking at urban heritage. I think I met Gurmeet in Jaipur in 2004, talking about Jaipur and the walled city and the Baulis. She showed me the Baulis of Jaipur, in fact. One can't forget all of this and remember only the immense amount of learning that one has derived from looking at the predicament of the heritage city, especially in the Indian context. You will, of course, read the profiles of our panelists in the chat bar. However, it's important for me to recognize that we are joined today by Mr. Ramyakumar, Deputy Commissioner of the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, Mr. Ashish Trambadia, who is a leading conservationist and in the service of Ahmedabad city and of the larger conservation needs of the country. He will be joined by Khushi Shah, who's also a conservationist, and they will both present to us an overall scenario currently in Ahmedabad. And we will be joined by Gurmeet Rai, who is one of the senior-most heritage conservationists of the country and a leading light in shaping new approaches to heritage conservation and cultural heritage revitalization in particular. And we'll also be joined by Jagdip Mehta ji, who is actually somebody who has put his money where his mouth is and has invested in restoring and revitalizing built heritage in the walled city. So we will hear from all of them. I just wanted to give a few framing lines before I invite Ashish and Khushi to present to us the current context in Ahmedabad. I think an interesting point from what Kirti Bhai was saying, that INHAF will also be looking at slums, for instance, and slums, and that there is a solution to slums. To me, it's very interesting because one of the predicaments of the heritage areas of our cities is that many of them are declared as slums. So, we are faced with this strange overlapping of discourses that takes place when you look at a heritage area as a slum. It is very easy to declare it as a slum based on your assessment of the state of the buildings. But having said that, it then gives a very, very difficult label to a heritage area, and it is very difficult to get out of that label. So the whole administrative machinery starts thinking of these areas as slums. I think the INHAF agenda of rethinking cities is fundamental to our conversation today. Why? Because today we'll talk about value. Underlying all of our points is likely to be some understanding and appreciation of what does value lie in cities. And especially at a time when commodification is a very major thrust of our economic processes, we are in a consumption-driven economy. How then does one bat for the heritage assets, which don't fit the usual framing of what a commodity really is? So, we are going to deal with very complex issues related to use value and, buildings that continue to be usable and we can do adaptive reuse. Buildings that are there simply as commemorations. They could be a pole with diyas on it, which is used during the Navratri festivities in Ahmedabad. That is a commemorative value, which is itself extremely ubiquitous and requires special attention. And then we're looking at living heritage, such as what Mr. Jagdip Mehta actually lives in, a house in the walled city of Ahmedabad, which has been restored, a timber construction, traditional construction building. All of this today will need to start connecting with our understanding of economic value. And I think the idea of a slum, the idea of revisioning value and then talking about the economic value is clearly one of the frames that I would put before our speakers today. All of this has to then lead to action. And today we are going to talk about action. So let us also try and focus our attention on things that can be achieved from experiences from around the country and the world. Let's look at the art of the possible when it comes to heritage revitalization. But I think it would be important for us to make sure that we do cover the important aspects, such as planning, the need for there to be legal backing for our planning approaches, whether it's a heritage plan that feeds into a development plan, the creation of spatial buffers, the creation of space where infrastructure might need to be built to actually make use of that heritage. Ahmedabad has taken great steps in, for instance, connecting the new metro system and earlier the BRTS system with the heritage city. Now we need to take it to the next level and in a sense, connect the last mile. And none of this is possible without finance. And I think that's why the economic value is crucial, because it is at the base of our arguments for either government providing incentives or for us to attract the investments, which increasingly will have to come from the private sector because the government doesn't have sufficient means to spend on what is a lower priority than basic services and infrastructure. And last but not the least, the management of the asset, but also the management of the larger area of the city itself, which poses a lot of challenging issues, such as what is the role of the local community, at what point does the city government have to step in? What are the things that state governments need to do? So we have a lot of these issues to talk about. Today's panel is going to be an excellent combination of voices talking about this. And I think we will develop our overall understanding of the subject as we go forward. We should start, and I would like to invite Mr. Ramyakumar, Deputy Commissioner of AMC, to share a few thoughts, which will set us in the right direction, following which I will request Ashish and Khushi to make a presentation on the Walled City nomination. Can I request the Deputy Commissioner, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kirti Bhai, for inviting me. I am Ramyakumar Bhatt. I am currently holding the charge for the Heritage Department as a Deputy Municipal Commissioner. Good to see some old faces. Ashish Bhai is here. He has worked with the department extensively, and recently only we met in another event. So this is a good opportunity to talk about the World Heritage City, Ahmedabad. And recently we had a visit from Miss Juni Han from the UNESCO, and she also went around in the city and looked at all the projects that is being going on. And one thing that was evident from that visit was, while we are talking about the entire old city as a World Heritage City, the living heritage is concentrated in very small areas, and that is a challenge that we as a government must address to. That while there is a huge demand because of the population growth and demographic pressures, that everybody needs a better home, a better locality, but we have to keep the heritage intact, and facing the development pressures while providing the modern lifestyle to everybody, aspirational lifestyle to everybody who is living in this heritage area. But we must preserve this living heritage that is World Heritage City. So everybody at Ahmedabad World Heritage City Trust understands the responsibility that we have been given, and we understand that while because it is a living heritage and people's aspiration and their desire to achieve a better lifestyle, we must keep the heritage intact. And for that, municipal corporation is spending a quite some amount to keep make the places better. We are coming up with more and more projects to make it more tourist friendly. We are also incentivizing the owners of the heritage houses to make sure that they fall into this particular idea that heritage is a boon for them. It is an economic powerhouse, and tourism actually helps everybody. So there are few examples that we have in our old city. I am sure it must be part of the presentation also, where the Dodia Haveli or any other bed and breakfast type of household, because of the government of Gujarat policy, the houses are they are being converted into a bed and breakfast house for the residents, tourists who are coming here in old city area. So that way, it is also generating some economic value for the residents of the World Heritage City. And if you see, our goal is to make sure that more and more tourists come here every year, and we are trying to create public places which are of world class quality. We have also taken up a project for redoing the entire heritage walk. That is, a famous heritage walk from temple to mosque. So we are redoing that entire thing with European standards, and people who come here would actually feel that they are visiting an international place. We are also coming up with a project on the banks of the river Sabarmati, where there are places which were unvisited for a long time. So we are trying to make that accessible for the tourists who are coming, and that is nearby to the modern attractions like the Imagika Park, which is going to come up on the eastern bank of the river Sabarmati. So this particular tourist project is also going to be adjacent to that. So that way, modern attractions and combined with the heritage places for visit, I'm sure that city would be a good place to, be a tourist into, and it will attract more and more international tourists and even the domestic tourists from India. That's all from my side. I'll be happy to answer any questions in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. I think that helps us also move forward into the presentation on the walled city. I think you've defined some of the key issues and challenges that we face, particularly with regard to the development pressures on the living heritage. So I think now to dive into really what we are talking about, this heritage city as an asset. Can I invite Ashish? And Ashish, I think you and Khushi together will make this presentation. Please, over to you.
Thank you so much. I think Kirti Bhai to arrange this, and we have more than 100 discussions already on the cities. Cities are
probably the driving force of our country's development. Of course, Ahmedabad is also, I think, not behind, and I can probably share this from my own experience, being my hometown. Ahmedabad has continuously grown in last 7 centuries plus, if I may take the liberty to think of the pre-establishment of Ahmedabad in that particular name frame. Historically, this settlement has been growing since last more than 700 years. And when I say grow, it's not only about architecture or city plan. So I think we are a city of growth, not really only because of certain phase of development which was beautiful or which makes it only unique. But at the same time, we have got World Heritage boundaries which are defined. So we have got the historic city area identified as World Heritage Site, and I think that is the main prime area for all of us for discussion today. But I would request the team of INHAF to kind of start presenting the one of the maps that we have. The map number one, I think, will help us set the context. But very aptly, as you mentioned, Jagan sir, about the urban challenges that our country is facing today, and the approach in which we need to look at cities' finances and development. Bhatt sir already mentioned the current issues and also the perception that we come across most of the times, which is not really comparable to the general idea of a touristic world heritage. Whereas this city is a city of urban growth. I think Ahmedabad has a very interesting story to tell about how to grow as a urban community rather than just making some picture-friendly buildings. This is the recent development plan, 2021 development plan, and there is one more draft DP 2041 already released. We can expect. Please go back to the first one. These maps are only for general references. So comparing to the overall urban growth, which is expected to be more than 1,800 square kilometers, our urban areas with the municipal corporation is 500 square kilometer plus. What we have inscribed as World Heritage is approximately 5.4 square kilometer out of the entire development area. And what we have done is since 2014, with the first development plan that was drafted in 2014, we actually gave a separate identity to this world city, which is apart from the general definition of Gamtal. Like Jagan sir was saying, that the historic cores are more and more considered to be urban slums. We said since 2014, Ahmedabad was the first city to have a separate denomination for the core walled city as a special zone, which is not just a slum. It is a headquarter. It is probably the most thriving city business district. So it's a CBD, also Central Business District of the city, even today for this larger expansion in 500 square kilometer for the municipal boundaries, and maybe in future for these 1,800 square kilometer plus urban areas. So even today, your most important railway station, your bus depot, your APMC market, your flower markets, and so many centralized regional level economic activities are still happening in this 5 square kilometer. One can look at the pressure that this little city part is going through. When we look at the general urban density, approximately 4,80,000, I think, according to the census data, we have got 75,000 person per square kilometer when compared to the general area density of Ahmedabad, which is approximately 6 to 7,000 when we compare the urban region and the urbanized AMC boundaries. It will be somewhere between 12 to 15,000 per square kilometer. So we got 75,000 square kilometer of residential population, which is almost one third or maybe little less than that. So floating population coming every day is much more. We have got 10 to 15 lakh people stepping into the world city for the purpose of business, for the purpose of travel. Tourism is one of the activity, but there are so many people who are coming to the world city every day. So that is the kind of pressure that we are talking. So it's, uh, because we all already feel that we need to do something. I'm just making everybody aware that this is a city which has already so many things happening. So it's not just about good architecture or good streets. It's also about having good businesses, having good connections, and make the city fit for these kind of uses. Before we move on, I would actually step back into 2017 when we became the first of its kind World Heritage Site in India, where we have all these things to discuss. Most of the sites that we have previously were either directly with with the central government authority of the archaeological regulations or the authorities of the forest regulations. And lastly, also we had some railways site, but those properties are singly handled by one stakeholder authority, whether it is railways, forest, or archaeology. Here we have a situation, we have got almost all the departments of governance, so many private, so many NGOs are also performing, and they are the main stakeholders, the owners of the property of this World Heritage Site within the 5 square kilometers. So I think that that complication that we started from the Indian context, it also very important when we compare that to the development of the World Heritage Sites of the other areas and other contexts. So cities is a very different matter from a general World Heritage Site. Having said that, I would like Khushi to tell us about how the inscription was made and what is happening presently. I'll come back to that part again. Over to you, Khushi.
Yes, I'll just share my screen. Just need to locate the file. So, thank you, Ashish, for the very interesting introduction to the context and setting the background. From my part, I've been part of the World Heritage nomination process as part of the CEPT University team. And before that, in 2003, between 2003 and 2005, I was also involved with the Indo-French Cooperation Project for the revitalization, wherein we were conducting a lot of groundwork for documentation, restoration, pilot projects, and such. So over the 20 years, I've seen this city, which is very close to all of our hearts, change and grow, sometimes for good, sometimes for in a different way, in a painful way. But the city remains the most important, most lively, and the most important school of urbanism in India for architects, urban designers, planners, all alike. And that's why I think Kirtibai's idea of having this webinar also is very important, because we have arrived quite far, we have actually walked a long road, but there's more to do. So, of course, let's start with, I don't know how I can turn this off. Oops, sorry. Are you seeing more than my screen or just my screen? This is better. Okay, let's start with the moment when the nomination was declared. This is 2017. Everybody was very happy, and we had our city inscribed for criteria 2 and 5. But what does this World Heritage listing mean, and why does any city or why does any country aspire to be part of this list? We have something called United Nations uh, Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Everybody knows. We say we are very proud of the UNESCO World Heritage City tag. But this is part of a convention that most countries in the world have signed from 1972, and the convention sets out certain roles and responsibility for protection of the heritage. So when we say it is a World Heritage Site, we mean that the site is actually significant not just to the people who are living there, not just to the people who care for it or have had any personal association with it, but it has a significance that is much larger at the scale of humanity. Every human being in the world actually could associate with the values that the site represent. The process of nomination is, of course, multi-stage process wherein we start with creating a preliminary documentation to put the site on the tentative list. After that, there is more detailed documentation and a planning process that the site undergoes through various actors of the state party. State party in this case is, of course, India. And at the time of this nomination, ASI was a nodal agency. We also had Advisory Committee on World Heritage Matters, which supported ASI to give the feedback to different teams which were working on this preparation of the nomination. In Ahmedabad on ground, of course, we had Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation and the Heritage Department under leadership of Dr. Mr. Nair. We can't call him Mr. Nair sir. And on the other hand, we had CEPT, Center for Conservation Studies at CRDF CEPT University, under the leadership of Professor Vasavada. So together with various wings of AMC and various experts, both internal and external to CEPT, we worked on this dossier for many, many years. Following which it was again sent to the Central Committee, which submitted it to UNESCO. And there was an evaluation process, after which the dossier was accepted, and the criterias that we had proposed, some of them were accepted as being applicable to the heritage of Ahmedabad, and we got the World Heritage listing. But it's not that the value of Ahmedabad was not known or not recognized before it was declared World Heritage Site. Since more than 100 years, we have seen, and in fact, way back in 16th century, 17th century, we have all these European travelers who came to, not 16th century, 17th, 18th century onwards, all these European travelers who came to Ahmedabad, who wrote about the uniqueness of its architecture, heritage, culture, and so on. But concretely, we find a major document, which is Petroglyphs Notes on Ahmedabad in 1915, which talks in detail about the value of the heritage, the city, and its planning. We have the Census of India report from 1961, which actually created a list and inventory of heritage buildings, specifically, wooden buildings and timber cowed facades and such, and identified their locations, the kind of ornamentation, and so on. There was also a lot of interest internationally in 1984. Ford Foundation, Delhi, and AMC worked together on an urban conservation proposal for the city. And in 1997, there was an Indo-French initiation of the Indo-French Cooperation Project, which went on till 2006. The first phase, of course, resulted in what we all know as French report, which was a documentation listing and inventories of heritage buildings, as well as general guidelines for the conservation, and followed by pilot restoration projects. So what I want to say here is that the heritage of Ahmedabad, even if there was it was sort of a smaller city in 1960s. It was still the most important trade center of British India and its importance as an urban center, as a planned historic city with its own unique character was well known over the years. Apart from this, we have various studies from various school of architecture, planning, and all. Through the entire 20th century, which actually recognize this value. Now, the process, just a general timeline, it started in 2010. The city was placed on tentative list in 11. The documentation and preparation of dossier as well as the draft management plan happened between 2011 and 2015. And in 2016, we had the e-commerce evaluation mission on ground. There was, at this point, experts from e-commerce would visit, they would actually look at our documentation and on-ground situation to evaluate whether what we are saying about what we have documented, what we have put in the dossier actually is matching the ground condition and so on. And with a lot of back and forth between 2015 and 17, 2016 and 2017, the nomination was finally achieved, like the city was put on the list. Now, what we see here in the maps are the two plans which are part of the nomination dossier. Again, what at that time, it was at the initial time of the preparation of dossier, what we had was the conception of core zone and buffer zone. So the core zone is the area which is a site of the inscribed property, whereas the buffer zone is an area around the property which is normally supposed to be regulated in a way such that the heritage values remain preserved. So the core zone actually is where all the regulations and guidelines will apply more strictly, and buffer zone might have certain relaxations, but it still has to be monitored and it still needs to be taken care of. And again, the satellite image showing the same. Now, what are the criteria for which Ahmedabad, what is the value of Ahmedabad, what is the character of Ahmedabad for which we actually could get the World Heritage nomination? So initially, the World Heritage Convention also actually has 10 criterias. Some of them are for natural heritage, some for cultural heritage. And we have to justify that the heritage that we are proposing to be on the list actually justifies, due to its character, it's justified to correspond to one of these criterias. So the initial proposal was, of course, for criteria 2, 5, and 6, for which, after the evaluation process, 2 and 5 were accepted. And what are the criteria 2 and 5? Criteria 2 is exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time or within a cultural area of the world on developments in architecture or technology, monumental arts, town planning, or landscape design. And criteria 5 being an outstanding example of traditional human settlement, land use, sea use, which is representative of a culture or human interaction with the environment, especially when it has become vulnerable under the impact of irreversible change. We all know that the urban planning of Ahmedabad, which has its unique character with the pole, the house, pole, tour, and the architecture of its residential neighborhoods, as residential buildings, neighborhoods, as well as the Gujarat Sultanate architecture, which is really this amalgamation of the Hindus, Jain, and Islamic traditions of the region, would easily justify these two criteria. And as a result of all the heritage that has been preserved in the city over this many 6 centuries, we were able to actually demonstrate that the house form, the urban form, and the organization on city planning actually are the key characteristics for which this criteria can be considered fulfilled. These are some of the maps that are again part of the dossier. So the city has around 28 ASI protected monument with their core and buffer zone, and this ASI protected monument, because of the criteria 2, which is an important interchange of human values, where key, how do you say, assets due to which we could say that criteria 2 and 5, which is art and architecture technology, could be considered applicable. And the next map has some of the preserved heritage precincts. While we know that Ahmedabad has more than 300 poles, which are this unique urban settlement typology, not all of them have preserved their character in a how do you say, in a more authentic or integral sense. but we could identify more than 50 such precincts in the old city where the character was more or less preserved. One of the key aspects of this character is that there's a pole gate. There might be a water, shared community well, a pole gate, chabutro, and maybe a place of worship, maybe a mosque or a small temple or so on, depending on the community, and a variety of traditional houses, narrow streets, and so on, and no commercial activities beyond the pole gate. So, as Ashish already told about the immense development pressures and the economic significance of the city, the commercial development in the city has expanded over the years. And there weren't, even at the time of nomination, there weren't many such settlements which had preserved the traditional residential character. The next map is the map of listed areas and precincts and buildings, and some 2,696 important buildings were listed by Heritage Department of AMC and notified in the Gazette. So we have 28 monuments, 2,696 important buildings, and the entire walled city, which are part of protected area. Because even if the building itself is not significant, being part of the World Heritage listed site, it automatically becomes an area and an asset that needs to be monitored and taken care of. Just a brief view of e-commerce evaluation process. I'll not go into details, but you can see that there's a back and forth process of, on-site evaluation, questions, documentation, and so on. And it takes almost 2 years for this process to be completed. And eventually, the city became a World Heritage city. What is interesting, I'm just sharing this slide to, again, I didn't talk about this timeline, which is that the document was sent to UNESCO on 30th January 2016. And after the evaluation and on-site mission, the initial reaction of UNESCO was that while the city has value, there are issues in terms of protection and management that needs to be strengthened. And so the first idea was to defer the nomination. And in response to this, AMC presented multiple guarantees and promises to the World Heritage Committee, after which the nomination was accepted in 2017. I'm not sharing this to really critique on anything, but we have to understand that the process is very rigorous, and there's a responsibility that AMC and all of us as citizens have to really fulfill, because once we are on the list, we are responsible for this heritage for the entire humanity. So these were some of the recommendations from UNESCO at the time of inscription to take care of the minor lacunas and strengthening of some of the mechanisms that was required. And after 2017, even till date, there is always periodic reporting, monitoring, and a two-way process between UNESCO and AMC, who is the management authority or the trust that AMC has created. And this is to say that it's an ongoing process, and the dossier or the heritage listing does not freeze anything, but there is always scope for improving and strengthening the protection, which I think Ashish and other panelists will then talk about in more detail. But I was involved till this nomination bit in more details. I thought I'll just share the process with you. And one of the key concepts, while the justification is statement of outstanding universal value, this is what we are talking about. It's the value of Ahmedabad is not just for its citizens or inhabitants or people who work there or so on. It's for the entire humanity, and that's why it's called outstanding universal value. The statement reads, the city of Ahmedabad, founded by Sultan Ahmad Shah in 15th century on the eastern bank of the Sabarmati River, presents a rich architectural heritage from the Sultanate period, notably the Badra citadel, the walls and gates of the fort city, and numerous mosques and tombs, as well as important Hindu and Jain temples of later periods. The urban fabric is made up of densely packed traditional houses in gated traditional streets with characteristic features such as bird feeders, public wells, and religious institutions. The city continued to flourish at the capital of the state of Gujarat for 6 centuries up to the present. So the continued importance of Ahmedabad again is not unknown to us, and this is what we call the essence of the World Heritage Site, which is also living, growing, and changing urban settlement. Now, this brings us to what we can do and what we should be focusing on. And these are the key challenges. Again, these are not new challenges, but as time goes by, the pace of change becomes more difficult to manage because we have less and less assets to actually justify the authenticity of this heritage. So here we have two articles. One is from 2018 and one is from 2023, talking about the same issues. There's a lot of vulnerable buildings because these buildings have also faced issues such as earthquake and rapid. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I was trying to turn off a pop-up on my screen. Let me. Okay. Okay. So the vulnerability of heritage buildings, which are weakened due to years of neglect and lack of maintenance, compounded by the effects of earthquakes and other natural disasters. And this is where the risk management, conservation effort, and technical capacity building needs to be some of the key aspects that we need to look in. Of course, there is action on all these fronts we'll be discussing later on. There's also, again, the fear of losing the World Heritage Tag that has been discussed from the very beginning. This article dates from November 2017. This from March 2022, this from May 2019. So we see that over the years, the civil society has and the media has been very proactive and vocal about what is happening in the city, while AMC also carried out this survey, which was actually, which quotes AMC after the COVID period. And we are seeing that a lot of buildings are being converted from residential to commercial. This again affects the integrity and authenticity of the site as well as loss of heritage assets. Another key aspect, of course, development pressures and how to manage change and effectively conserve the heritage. We have cases where the residential buildings have been converted to commercials, or we have larger infrastructure projects like metro, which results in loss of heritage buildings. The Center One, the old collector's office in this case, and the image on the right, which is the Gita Mandir bus station, which was expanded, which led to loss of a Mughal era building. Again, here it's not that the buildings are not listed, but how do you manage your development projects which actually integrate the heritage buildings without needing to demolish them? And this starts at the beginning of the planning or design process. Some of these projects predate the World Heritage nomination, or there have been other, binding circumstances. But going forward, this is something that is extremely effective, extremely important, and effective conservation and planning for development is something that we should stress on. And then, of course, there are concerns of not the regulations that are actually existing not being effective or not being implemented effectively. And this could be some issues related to the administrative proactiveness or capacity building, or even the mechanisms where where the owner and the heritage committee and the department, they are not being able to form a synergy, due to which the conservation projects, which the speed with which they should happen, or the manner in which they should happen may suffer. Again, all of this is from the news media on ground situation. I'm sure Ashish can throw more light on this for us. And I also look forward to Jagdip Bhai's presentation, because he's been actually living in the city and been experiencing this firsthand since the time his house actually was restored in 2004. So for 20 years, he's been actually dealing with all this, how do you say, uh, permissions and issues, development pressures, commercialization happening in the polls, the making, this is one of the things that we constantly discuss, Jagdip Bhai and I, about the commercial conversion of residential property to commercial properties inside the polls, and eventual loss of quality of life. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Khushi, for giving us a very good background. To now dive into our discussions, I'm going to request our panelists now to actually join, and that includes Ashish and Khushi also. I think some very interesting things have come out of Ashish's and Khushi's presentation. I like Ashish's differentiation, clearly saying that cities are very different from heritage. So, what drives a city and its growth and its impetus is very different from what drives heritage conservation at an urban scale. And one very interesting thing that Khushi said was something we should keep in mind, that Ahmedabad as a city has been like a school of urbanism. And it kind of raises the question that if old Ahmedabad did not exist, would new Ahmedabad look as significant? So cities that have heritage areas are very fortunate, because you actually can see the value addition that comes from historical evolution. So I think those are the kinds of nuances which we can pick up. An interesting and important point here also that emerges is that the every lost building, as Khushi put it, is weakening the claim to the nomination. So in some fundamental sense, this kind of urgency also needs to be communicated. And that brings me to just three sort of overall framing questions, and I hope that the panelists will try and sort of address them in their own ways. Is clearly that we do have a capacity shortage. Every single one of these 2696 buildings and 28 monument sites, all of these require literally at least one person to focus on them. We don't have enough conservationists and planners to even focus attention on these things. So capacity constraints, also for curating the conversation with the public, with elected representatives, and with other decision makers. So it's not just about having planners and designers. You need artisans, you need curators, all of this capacity that needs to be made available for a heritage city to revitalize is in short supply. The second is, who's going to build the narrative? Who does this marketing? Is it Ashish? Is it Khushi? Is it Mr. Bhatt? Who challenges and owns this narrative in society and pushes for it? So this marketing is essential in every society that has managed to conserve its heritage areas. And third, and most importantly, how does the city mobilize the resources required? So, it clearly isn't just the government's problem. It's not just the government that has to invest. Civil society has to invest. Institutions have to invest, like CEPT University is investing in the city. And individuals will need to invest, maybe high net worth individuals, who are interested in the city, who have originated in the city. Ultimately, all of this highlights the most important point that comes out of this presentation. Khushi presented a process that started in 2010. It's been 15 years, and this is the reason why Kirtibai has put together this session. We really need to get down to action to get this heritage city really protected and part of a dynamic futuristic metropolis. So with that, I want to actually turn to two people who haven't had a chance to speak till now, our two other panelists. So let me start by inviting Gurmeet to share her thoughts. I don't know if you have any slides, Gurmeet. Otherwise, please do share your thoughts on how do we get this action going. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jagan. And I don't have any slides. I would like to respond in the context of, and thank you, Khushi and Ashish, for the very informative presentation. At this juncture of my practice as a heritage conservation architect, as well as looking at work of my colleagues in the last 3 decades. And Jagan, you've been pioneering setting off, looking at heritage conservation by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the Hriday program. And that really got a lot of us thinking. In fact, I think I had to reinvent my practice while dealing with working in Amritsar and Puri. And though one had worked on individual buildings, monumental, less monumental in previous 2 decades, but working in a historic city, I had to turn my entire paradigm of my practice, like literally upside down, 180 degrees. Now, what I found very fascinating about the presentation that, what Khushi brought out, one, of course, I'd like to flag is certain considerations. One is that we definitely work with a paradigm set out by the Europeans, which from the drafting of the World Heritage Convention to the operational guidelines and so on. And what is very refreshing in that is also that every year when they have the World Heritage Committee meeting, they revisit some of the concepts. So rights-based approaches to heritage conservation, looking at community, consent before doing nomination and so on, have become now very important as part of the process. So interestingly, Europe, the Western world, is looking at process-centric conservation work. So that's one thing I'd like to flag here. The other is that when we, I looked at your, the criteria 2 and 5 that you're talking about. You're talking about monumental architecture and all of that. That, again, I would say is very Eurocentric. We are looking at a culture, we're looking at India where, it's like 3 centuries coexist. So people, the privileged ones, I would say, people like us who actually do the planning and do the conservation, are such a small part of the large landscape we are engaging with. So do we have the right vocabulary? So that's one question. Is the architecture or the town planning of the way it's been defined in criteria 2 justifying the complexity? The second point is when we talk about the criteria 5, when you're saying human interaction with environment, when it has become vulnerable under the impact of development. Now, the point is when it has become vulnerable, are we not supposed to look at the vulnerability points of vulnerabilities? What is vulnerable? Is it just the fabric or is it the people we are talking about? Have they become more vulnerable? Because we can't just be talking about the fabric and not talk about the vulnerability of people who inhabit these spaces. Then I come to the point of Patrick Geddes having done a plan for Ahmedabad. What does it even look like? Because what brings to my mind is that I worked on Patiala and Patrick Geddes had a plan there as well. Now he talks about a sociological approach. The man spoke about it 110 years ago. And it makes me a little embarrassed to say that even we as senior professionals have not understood what this sociological approach is. I'm kind of slowly moving, I would say there is a world to discover there. He talks about the diagnostic survey. What is this diagnostic survey overlaid over sociological approach? Are we understanding our constituency well enough? The third is a conservative surgery. What under governance, financial modeling, and so on are tools like conservative surgery. We're talking about transfer of development rights. We're talking about transit-oriented development. But are we talking about conservative surgery? how he looks at it with a sociological approach. He talks about the valley section, place, folk, and work. So he clearly is mindful of the economics. It's not that he's just doing some woozy emotions there, you know. He's talking about sociology, environment, economics, and all of that with people as the center. My understanding of Ahmedabad, which happened because I was, you know, lucky or invited to be um, conducting the conservation studio for the third semester master's program at CEPT. And I did it maybe, I forget, twice or thrice, I've forgotten. But whatever it was so enriching. I think it was 3 times. There were 15 students who were studying, who had chosen different aspects of the walled city of Ahmedabad. And there were about 45, 30 to 45, whatever number of works that I got to see of these students. And through that, you know, so we used to walk the city. They used to show their project. They did the whole, you know, the program. They looked at the whole city and they zoomed into small project areas. Now, how I see, I mean, it was only while the Bhadra and the central group of monuments and all of that, there's a lot of song and dance around all of that. And they are very, very interesting monuments to work with. What I found fascinating was the multiple layers of diversity, and diversity not to understand as counting them, but to understand the voices that they represent. You know, the Haveli, the Peshwa Haveli to the southwestern edge with a police inside. Cinema, the legacy of cinema, Gujarati cinema, the cinema halls, Gujarati theatre, the Parsi heritage, the pilgrimage centers or multiple sites associated with the Jain community, the Sufi heritage layer of the walled city, commercial hubs with the covered market and so on. Then, of course, the pole, experiencing the out-migration, the communities that are leaving, and the in-migration, people who are coming in. Every street, every corner, for me, who's a person from Delhi northwards, to get the opportunity to see this multi-layered, nuanced narrative of the walled city. And then, if I were to apply the lens of the 2 criterias, my definition completely changes. What is the architecture, monumental arts, town planning, and all of that when I put those people and those complexities at the center of the narrative? My entire experience of human interaction with environment and looking at vulnerability completely changes. And now to accept this change and to then develop a language of care. What does the language of care, where built fabric is one part of it, come out when you understand that layer? And so what I would like to, what I would like to say here is that is there something amiss in our theory of our practice that needs revisiting? And is that something that we need to now redefine? What is the conservation paradigm for the World Heritage City while upholding those 2 criteria? Should we be bringing in more granularity in our narrative so that we do justice to what the living and the material and the non-material cultural narratives of this land are? So that is what I would like to share here. And but thank you for Kirtibai for inviting me and Jagan for coordinating the whole thing. It's been quite interesting. I mean, the 2 presentations and responding to it.
Thanks, Gurmeet. Thanks very much for your thoughts. Love the way you end with the language of care, and I think that's a language obviously all of us need to learn even better than we already know. Let me invite Mr. Jagdip Mehta now, who will give us a very different but very important, and in fact most important perspective on what it is to actually own and live in the built heritage of Ahmedabad. Jagdip bhai? Would you have any visuals to share, or will you share your thoughts? Jagdeep bhai, are you on mute?
Can I speak in Gujarati?
Sure. I think
Yeah.
એમાં અગર કશું સ્પેશિયલ કશું વર્ડ તમે યુઝ કરશો તો હોપફુલી I'll try and
Right.
translate or
Right.
Ashish can help me. હા
Right.
જગદીપ ભાઈ પ્લીઝ.
Thank you very much. પહેલા તો મને ઇન્વાઇટ કર્યો અને આ બધાના મેં ડિસ્કશન્સ સાંભળ્યા અને પોળ હું માનું છું કે પોળ એ પોતે એક હેરિટેજ છે. વોલ સિટીની અંદર જે પોળ છે એ પોતે એક હેરિટેજ છે. તો એને હેરિટેજને બચાવવું એ આપણે બધાનું ભેગું થઈને કામ છે. એટલે અમે લોકો તો પ્રયત્ન કરીએ છીએ. 2004થી અમારું ઘર રિસ્ટોર થયું ત્યારથી અમે લોકો આને સાચવવાનો પ્રયત્ન કરી રહ્યા છે. પણ જ્યારથી વર્લ્ડ હેરિટેજ યુનેસ્કોએ ડિક્લેર કર્યું આપણે અમદાવાદને, ત્યારથી હેરિટેજ બિલ્ડિંગના જે તમે કહો ને કે વેલ્યુ એ ઘટતી ગઈ છે. એનું રીઝન એ છે કે હેરિટેજ જે બિલ્ડિંગ્સ છે એને લોકોની અવેરનેસ નથી કે મારા હેરિટેજ બિલ્ડિંગને કેવી રીતે બચાવવું. તે ઉપરાંત એને જે અમુક હર્ડલ્સ હોય છે કે એને રિપેર કરાવવું છે, એટલી બધી એની પ્રોસેસમાંથી એને પાસ થવું પડે છે કે એ પોતે એને રિપેર કરાવવું હોય તો પણ કોર્પોરેશનની અંદર જઈને એને એપ્લિકેશન આપવાની આ તે. બાકી હેરિટેજ સિવાયના જે મકાન હોય છે એ લોકો એમને બધું કરી શકતા હોય છે. અને જેટલો કાર્પેટ એરિયા હેરિટેજ બિલ્ડિંગનો હોય છે એટલો જ કાર્પેટ એરિયા બીજા જે હેરિટેજ નથી હોતું તો એનો રેટ વધારે મળતો હોય છે, કારણ કે ત્યાં દુકાન ને ગોડાઉન બનતું હોય છે. હવે પોળ એ અંદરનો ભાગ છે એ ગામતળની જગ્યા છે. એકચ્યુઅલી ત્યાં હેતુફેર થવો જ ના જોઈએ. તો આ આટલા બધા કોમર્શિયલાઇઝેશન થઈ ગયું ત્યાં સુધી કોર્પોરેશન વાળાએ શું કર્યું દેટ વી ડોન્ટ નો. પણ જે આપણું વોલ સિટીનું જે લિવિંગ હેરિટેજ છે એ ખતમ થઈ રહ્યું છે. હવે ઓલિમ્પિક આવી રહી છે એ પહેલા જો આટલા 3000 મકાન છે એ પણ બચશે નહીં તો લિવિંગ હેરિટેજ લોકો આવીને જોશે શું? એટલે એનું ટુરિઝમ ઉપર પણ ઇફેક્ટ થાય છે. તે ઉપરાંત આટલું બધું કોમર્શિયલાઇઝેશન છે એટલે દુકાનો ગોડાઉનો છે એટલે એના હિસાબે લોડિંગ રિક્ષાઓની અવર જવર છે, એનાથી પોલ્યુશન વધતું હોય છે અને ટ્રાફિકની પણ સમસ્યા થતી હોય છે કારણ કે નેરો સ્ટ્રીટ છે. તો એના માટે પણ કોર્પોરેશનને કંઈક પગલાં લેવા જોઈએ. હું તો એવા પણ સજેશન આપું છું કે જો કોઈ કંપની હોય એના CSR એ લોકો ગાર્ડન અને 4 રસ્તાઓ પર જે ફાઉન્ટેન મેન્ટેન કરવા માટે CSR યુઝ કરે છે તો આવી રીતે અમુક પોળો એડપ્ટ કરી અને એ લોકો પોતાનો CSR યુઝ કરી શકે કે જેથી આખી પોળો બચી જશે. અને જેમ ખુશીબેને કીધું કે 300 જેટલી પોળો છે, તો હવે પોળોની અંદર રહેતી વ્યક્તિ જ ના હોય ત્યાં આખું અમુક પોળો તો એવી છે કે એમાં એક પણ રેસિડેન્શિયલ નથી, આખી ને આખી પોળો કોમર્શિયલ થઈ ગઈ છે. તો એને પોળ ગણવી કે ના ગણવી એ પણ એક છે વસ્તુ કે આટલી બધી વસ્તુઓ જે છે સિટીની અંદર લોકોને જરૂરિયાતની વસ્તુઓમાં રહેવું છે પણ નથી કોઈ સારી સ્કૂલ, નથી હોસ્પિટલ, નથી પ્લેગ્રાઉન્ડ. એટલે આ ઇવન એમ્બ્યુલન્સ કે ફાયર બ્રિગેડ પણ અંદર આવી નથી શકતું. એટલે એટલો બધો ટ્રાફિકની બધી સમસ્યાઓ છે. નો ડાઉટ અમને પાણી વ્યવસ્થિત મળે છે, ઘરની અંદર શાંતિ પણ છે, પોળો પણ ચોખ્ખી છે, પણ આ બધા રીઝનને હિસાબે લોકો માઇગ્રેટ થતા જાય છે એટલે પોળો ખાલી થતી જાય છે અને જે ખાલી મકાન થાય છે ત્યાં દુકાન ને ગોડાઉન થઈ જાય છે. એટલે આના માટે આપણું કોર્પોરેશન જાગૃત થાય. તે ઉપરાંત જે TDRની જે પ્રોસેસ છે એ પણ બહુ લાંબી છે, એના માટે પણ વધારે રૂપિયા ખર્ચવા પડે છે. તેમ છતાં બી લોકોને એ પ્રોસેસમાંથી પસાર થવું પડે છે અને જે TDR ફર્સ્ટ ટાઈમ આપ્યો હોય એ 10 વર્ષ પછી એનું રિન્યુ ઓટો થવું જોઈએ એવી મારી એક ડિમાન્ડ છે કે જેથી દરેક વ્યક્તિ પોતાના ઘરને મેન્ટેન કરી શકે. અને જે વ્યક્તિ ત્યાં રહેતો હોય અને મેન્ટેન કરતો હોય એવા લોકોને TDR મળે તો દેટ ઇઝ વેલ એન્ડ ગુડ. આ મારું સજેશન છે.
Thank you, Jagdip Bhai. Thank you for sharing those issues. Gurmeet, for you and for other listeners who could not understand all of the Gujarati, I'm sure you picked up some of the words. Those are easy to recognize. But Jagdip Bhai has actually shared basically the big issue. જે સૌથી મોટો જે મુદ્દો તમે રેઝ કર્યો કે પોળો ખાલી થઈ જાય છે, લોકો જતા રહે છે એને લીધે એનું લેન્ડ યુઝ પણ બદલી જાય છે. All of these things are interrelated. So, Gurmeet, he's basically saying that, keeping that pole as a particular typology of buildings and the use and the culture of it is ultimately our goal. So, he's even distinguishing, like you have done, between the built heritage and its significance and its connection with lifestyles. And Jagdip Bhai has made a request about the TDR process itself. It is overly cumbersome, but also some kind of a window should be given for the TDR even to be extended, and because it is an incentive, and incentives should continue to prevail. I think it would be appropriate for me to now request Mr. Bhatt again to share some thoughts as responses to what has been presented by Ashish, Khushi, the issues they have raised. Gurmeet has also shared her point perspective, and Jagdip Bhai has also shared. Can I request Mr. Bhatt to share his thoughts?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All the points are well taken. I completely agree with Jagdish Bhai. He's staying inside the old city area. So apart from heritage, I'm also the deputy commissioner for this old city area. I'm making sure that all the basic services are provided through municipal corporation. So completely agree with him, because all the challenges that we face while we want to provide all the modern amenities to the residents, but sometimes the heritage tag becomes a shackle in our foot. We cannot move because of that. So, for example, he's asking about the modern amenities like firefighters and ambulances at the doorstep. We cannot provide it traditionally because the poles were never designed to handle any of such vehicles. So if we want to provide all these modern amenities to the people, then we have to go for some redevelopment. And then when we go for the redevelopment, we lose out on the heritage values and all those things. So it is a counter balancing thing that we have to make sure that, what we prioritize over other things. So at this moment, we are prioritizing the conservation and preservation of the heritage. So we have to, make sure that we are not getting into all the other sorts. At the same time, I have been in my 15 years of career, I have worked with this old city area for more than 11 years, and I completely, agree with all the residents who are facing the issues. And I always tell my team that the city has survived for last 614 years, but I am not sure how we are going to survive the city for next 50 years if we keep on doing whatever we are doing as of now. So we have come up with an RFP where we are hiring the consultant to create a, the development plan which is aligned while maintaining the heritage, which is aligned with the net zero goals, and also, how we are going to handle all the development pressures that we are going to face in upcoming years. So how the city would look like by 2070, we have to plan it from now onwards. So we have come up with an RFP, and I'm sure that in time of 6 months or a year, we'll have some kind of document which is available for public scrutiny, and we'll make it public so that people can provide their feedback. For TDR, maintenance TDR, yes, we are considering that. That is in deliberation. We have received inputs from different quarters also that we should consider this maintenance TDR. So it is in consideration. No guarantees, but it is in consideration. That is for sure. And for the process, I understand that process sometimes seems very cumbersome, but because it is an heritage property and it has to go through all the scrutiny and all those things, it becomes a little bit cumbersome. But to ease the process, we have completely migrated on an online process where the owner of the property can, track their applications and everything. And anything, if people is facing any issue, my office doors are always open. My number is also available in Google, so people can reach out to me. That's what I would say from this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. May I also ask a question? Wherever we have seen these heritage conservation at an urban scale succeed, whether it is in Japan, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, or in the Western countries or South America, wherever we see that, what we do see as a common factor is that the local authorities, the local administration creates the appropriate mechanism by which the goal can be achieved. And when I say appropriate mechanism, very often it is about putting the right people in place so that the discretionary aspects of heritage conservation can be dealt with. So you're a technologist, and you do understand that there is a certain level to which we can standardize. But especially in the heritage conservation space, every single case has to be looked at, in a particular way. And what Jagdish Bhai mentioned, that if a pole has ceased to be a residential space, should it continue to be listed as a pole? Those kinds of issues keep cropping up, and they are dealt with. So my point here is that, have we developed the institutional capacity to deal with this kind of complexity, and showing that in all cases we are able to move forward, not problem solving, but actually creating the incentives, attracting finance, these kinds of skills and capacities. Could you share a little bit about your plans on that front?
Yes, from the capacity building in the internal departments and the Heritage City Trust, there is much desire to be done yet. While we are discussing with many of the institutions to improve our in-house capacity, for example, we have signed an MOU with GICA so that their members can, work with us and work with the owners of the properties to make sure that they are getting all the technical guidance that they need. At the same time, the artisans who are working on this kind of, say, lime and mortar or on the wooden carving and all those things, there is a dearth of them, to be very frank. And at the same time, finding so many people working on this kind of high quality job, it is also very difficult. And because the private projects are well funded, and they are giving much better rates compared to what individual citizen can provide for, say, a house of 40 square meters, it is very difficult to get all those kind of artisans on board. And at the same time, we are also facing a lack of, say, private contractors who are expert in dealing with this kind of properties. So what we have seen, and Ashish Bhai can vouch for that, local contractors who are working on, say, heritage conservation, they don't realize the type of wood elements they are taking out from the building. So they try to replace it with steel or something like that. So hand holding each and every house and each and every contractor at every time, it will require a tremendous amount of skilled expert and manpower for sure.
Okay, thank you. On the front of what you said about dismantling the building, and then these heritage elements get into the market and they disappear. Of course, there's a thriving market for woodwork and so on coming out of old houses. I had the opportunity to frame the heritage policy for Surat, in which we had created as an incentive, actually, that the SMC would maintain a recovered heritage elements bank, or a place where they would store, because otherwise it will end up being burnt as firewood or something like that will happen to it. So I hope that Ahmedabad can also consider, if not already. But I see Ashish has his hand up, and so does Khushi. So Ashish, you go first, then I'll request Khushi.
Yeah,
Over
I
to you.
think we are as we are furthering into our discussion, I would like to request that there are a couple of slides that we have added. There is a little bit of context here. What happened is, when we did the nomination dossier, people were not knowing about it. So I think I'll request the INHAF team to present some of the slides that I have, and I'll just give you the remaining part of the overview or brief that I had thought of, which will kind of connect the gap between the nomination and the current
Sure.
issues. So
Okay.
move on to the next one. Just, I mean, this is to corroborate the idea of, no, the map one, please, previous one, black and white map. This is the footprint of built and open of the walled city. I mean, Khushi had already showed the kind of intensity of heritage buildings, and as Ramya Bhatt sir already mentioned, it is in certain parts but not in the other parts. Right now, the regulations for the walled city are uniform for the entire 5 square kilometer. But on top of that, we have got 27 monuments, 28 monuments of national protection, 1 monument of state protection, and there are 2 more monuments which are in the buffer zone. So total 31 monuments, around 100 meters of which none of the buildings get permission, because it is a prohibited zone, so no development. neither a new water supply line nor a service line, the sewerage line can be laid, nor a building can be reconstructed. So those are the regulations that we need to understand. Number one. Number two, if you're talking about mobility, the issues of having firefighters and ambulances inside the walled city, this is not the footprint. This 15th century city was never planned to receive the transportation that we are receiving now. So that, I think we are quite late. After having our first census done in 1961, I think we were quite late to develop these mechanisms, and probably now, when we are shifting to the housing colonies where you park your vehicles in the third basement and you walk up to your residential apartments, I think now that adaptation to new policies of parking your vehicles somewhere else, as I mentioned earlier, if we have 12 to 15 lakh persons coming into the world city today, they still prefer to use private vehicles. They have to park right bang on the road because none of these buildings can have basements. Because not only these 100 meters, but also the 300 meters, regulations do not allow basements. Regulations do not allow construction more than 15 meters. Just compare the density of population there. Now, these are the issues that we need to discuss. I'm not saying these are not addressable problems, but this is what it is. Second, we can move on to the next one. Next slide, please. One more, please. I will come back to the tourism much later. One more. So the culture of care, as Gurmeet mentioned, I think that's how even I thought. So once this nomination process was done, actually it was our combined responsibility, not only AMC, ASI, State Department of Archaeology, Tourism Development Department, Culture Department. There are more than 100 schools in the old city, so education department. There are hospitals in the old city, so health department, police headquarters, which are housed in the Gaikwad Haveli, Peshwa Haveli, which Gurmeet was referring to. All of these are responsible. Not only AMC, which can say restore your house, or else will take actions against you. But on the contrary, what we did from the municipal side, I'm right now not the director, and I think people should note that. But what AMC has done, I think I have got with points that I have narrated in a very short, precise manner. First thing was to make the owners aware that their building is a listed heritage building. So out of 2,692 buildings identified in the dossier, people resisted to be included in the heritage list. Our final notification, which was notified in 2016, we had 2,685 buildings. So, and those 2,685 buildings owners were never knowing that whether that building is heritage or it is their neighbor's building or it is their part of their building, only the facade of their building, which is heritage. So first thing that was to be done was awareness drive. We did installation of these plaques, which is a pride plaques, as you can see one of the pictures below, which is giving the pride of heritage, what is the grade, where it is located, what are the regulations, then people will start referring to. Like Jagdish Bhai said, if anybody can do anything in the old city, there'll be no law and order. That's definitely not a way to go. But by doing this, actually, we made aware of the people, and that's how these newspaper people started taking the numbers down. And I think that also triggers some kind of mass awareness movement, but in a very negative mindset. So second interesting point that corporation started doing is with this World Heritage City Trust, on its own cost, they would produce the architectural drawings. Now remember that each of the house will have at least 3 owners, because most of these houses are ancestral properties subdivided into brothers of the families, further subdivided into the grandchildren of the families. So there are multiple owners in each house. Most of the time, to come to the consensus for restoration is very difficult. So that is another point. So when we did the empanelment of more than 17 teams of architects who would be doing parallelly the documentation, the drawings on the old city at the cost of corporation for the privately owned buildings, or say school department, education department's building, or police department's building, they would first of all say, will not allow you. So there is a kind of problems that this sites will. So these 17 teams were actually supposed to be an engagement for new young architects with the owners, but it is slowly happening. I'm not saying it is not happening, but it is a challenge. I mean, it's not that easy as it sounds. Second is the TDR incentive. We are all knowing that this 2,685 buildings which were notified in 2016 were entitled to transferable development rights. But because everybody knows that now there is more money, the artisans will start charging them more. The contractors will say it is much more costlier. And these are the kind of challenges that I think we cannot control as municipal authority. We need to come to a market, we need to come to a community level awareness where we can work together to conserve. I'm quite sure that the 17 teams are not as active, except for 2 or 3 architectural practices and educational institute. Most of them did not really continue to work on the documentation project that was launched. So many other initiatives are also taken. There are issues which are also related to livelihood. So if we say no to commerce, where will these people go? If we have, say, consider only the amount of business that the old city receives today, the GST collection, I'm quite sure if we get the numbers, old city would be highest in the entire 1800 square kilometer area of Ahmedabad urban sprawl. So that is the concentration of business that we have. The need of transportation for those businesses, one needs to take care. Of course, they should not go inside the poles, but how are the main roads capable of taking that? Will we be able to increase their capacity of storage of goods? Will we be able to widen the road to receive more goods movement on the streets? So what are the alternatives? We have missed to do that. I think these are some of the points that I would like to make. Next one, please. The one on tourism, which is the last thing. I think from 1996, we are doing our heritage walk. Yeah, the tourism one, the previous one. That's the one, number 3. So we are doing our heritage walk, which runs in the morning hours, so that your businesses do not get disturbed in the business hours, afternoon and late evening. We did the attempt to pedestrianize Badra Plaza, failed miserably because of the people's resistance. It was all planned to have the Patharnawada or the informal sector getting better business because it was pedestrianized. It is those people who actually come against the municipal corporation, say we want vehicles here. So once there are vehicles, there'll be chaos. There'll be so many vendors, there'll be so many vehicles. So there are alternative methods that we need to explore and make it more compatible. Tourism is the last priority because the numbers are very small as of now. And I think it will only increase if we will make this city more livable, more usable. Even if you are a business owner, it should make sense to have better business in the old city. And I think that is the need of the hour. And I think I'm very happy to hear from Deputy Commissioner Sir that they're inviting more ideas for better development. And this is not really about preservation and conservation only. But on that front, in 2,685 buildings, we added 13 more buildings later on. I don't see that as failure. I think that's more better because then later people were convinced, they were more excited to be included in the list. So there is way in which I think this has happened. City has always been first of its kind. So Ahmedabad Corporation was the first one to have an MOU with ASI to develop the surroundings of the monuments. AMC was the first one to say, you restore your monument and the surrounding development, we will take care. So Astoria Darwaza, Badra Plaza was done under that MOU. We were also the ones who did a number of MOUs with private CSR and non-CSR corporates who developed many of our gardens, many of our schools. Polls are also possible. One example we already saw, I think in 2012, we had the first CSR through NCF for the Sevani Haveli, and that triggered the interest area in Dhalni Pole, and somehow the Mahila Housing Trust managed to get that interesting initiative done in the old city. So all those things are way forward, but will people like to live here? And to make them more livable, we need to make it more compatible to people who are living there. I think that's as responsible citizen, at least we can do is to take our private vehicle and park right there. Number one. Number two, there are so many policies that helps you. If you have a building there, if you don't know what to do, there are so many policies. We have a homestay policy. Jagdish Bhai is one of the best examples, and I think he's an award-winning homeowner to receive at least thrice the national award and so many other international national awards for a homestay. But we also have heritage tourism policy, which gives you good incentives for maintenance, to have proper professional staff, to kind of give you a relaxation from commercial electricity and taxation charges for 5 years. So those are the policies that must be explored. There are so many packages that are announced by the government of Gujarat also for the educational institutions. People have to come forward and do that. I think that's what I would say. We have done a conservation plan, including inputs from NID, NIUA, NIDM, APARC, so many CEPT Institute, and so many organizations have worked on this heritage conservation plan draft, which I would request that it can be put up for public consultation so that we can, in fact, look at the context of archaeological regulations and how they can be merged with these outstanding universal values, which is not only in those 28 monuments, but they are basically in the entire 5 square kilometer city and its buffer. And here, this buffer area is supposed to help decrease the pressure from the walled city. So I think that European mindset that Gurmeet was talking about is also an important one from India to go. That it's not a buffer zone where you need to reduce, but also to relieve the pressure from the old city area. So with that, I think I would let
Thank you.
Khushi.
Thank you, Ashish. Before Khushi comes in, I just wanted to also flag this whole point about the buffer zone itself. I think falls in a category of the kind of dogma or dogmatic views which we have inherited also from a different context. Because the way a buffer operates in India is very different from the way it will operate in much more regulated societies. Whereas here, a buffer is like, it seems to be completely unreasonable as a restriction. So a buffer is for conservation sort of like wanting to build blue and green infrastructure, wanting to build public spaces. These are whole issues to do with commons, whereas listed property is a listed property. It's a very tangible thing. The idea of a buffer is very intangible, as a social good, as an economic good, as well as what are its implications. So it always seems unreasonable, and we have to revamp our whole approach to how to look at buffers, not in numerical terms ki itna badha diya, itna kam kar diya, but in qualitative terms. What do we really mean, and how do you explain to a property owner that you're a buffer? It's to me one of the big challenges. But with that thought, let me also bring in Khushi. Khushi, your thoughts?
I just want to, just a bit.
Yes, Mr. Bhatt,
I just
please,
want to add, yes, that one thing is already covered by Jagdish Bhai, that this old city area is still classified as a GAMTAR. So if we see our development control regulation issued by AUDA, the old city area is still considered as a GAMTAR, and that comes with its baggage. Second thing, that recent statistic that I have come across, that government of India suggests that there should be at least per capita 12 to 15 square meter of open space available in any of the town planning scheme. But when we saw the old city area, the number is staggering, 1.5 square meter only. So only 10% of what is proposed by the government of India. So these two things are affecting the quality of life in general. So while preserving heritage and conserving heritage is our prime motto, but we must understand that we have to work in a way that we can improve the overall living standard in this area. So that is what requires development and some progressive thought on that.
Agreed. But I think imposing the space standards which apply to a greenfield location on something like a heritage city is always going to be almost impossible to do. We can't get that kind of open space, and why should it be applied to a walled city area when it's actually a standard meant for new layouts and so on? But having said that, I think these are the kinds of issues that we will have to deal with to get some action going on the ground. Khushi, do you want to come in with your thoughts?
Yes, I think, thank you, Ashish, addressed a lot of new inputs that have AMC has brought into practice over the years. And that's exactly what the whole idea of nomination was. Nomination, when we started the process, it was not for UNESCO or Europe or whoever. It was so that the people of Ahmedabad recognize and appreciate and feel pride in the value. And all the time, the ownership of this heritage and the way Jagdip Bhai takes it, the way AMC has actually strived as being a pioneer to actually even attempt this, because I was part of the French project. And when I asked the people who were behind this project, why did you choose Ahmedabad? Like, there were so many cities in India. And they said Ahmedabad was the most difficult. A key expert that we had during the process of nomination, when he came to visit Ahmedabad, he looked at the traffic regulation and how lenient and smiling the traffic policemen were. Like, the traffic policemen are smiling. A person is going on the wrong side on the street, on the crowded street, and the policemen are smiling, and the traffic moves around without having any accident, without fights. So this is the character of the city. Like, at this point, this was in 2012, and he was like, I'll not name the person, but he was like, how are you going to manage this? You cannot, if this is your police force, if this is the way people behave, if people, like, you are doing something wrong, I'm also doing something wrong, we are friends, we are neighbors. And Gujarati માં કે આ ખાડા કાન કરવા, that's a common way of life that we make do. We can call it jugaad, we can call it whatever, we can call it friendships. And so while we had to follow this European guided process for nomination, it was never lost to us that Ahmedabad is not a European city. Of course, I have summarized in this presentation about a lot of nuances that Gurmeet talks about. We have understood it, we have recognized it. But at this point, I think everybody in AMC and everybody in this team, and me especially, being educated in France and having really seen a very strict guided process, we were aware that it's not going to be so straightforward. It's not going to work like it is supposed to work in a very straitjacket UNESCO formulation. But I think the will of the people, the will of the local government to even attempt this is something that actually separates Ahmedabad. Will of people like Jagdip, I have known him, I've seen him for 20 years, I've seen the kids grow up. And I know that in 20 years, the education, quality of life, everything has gone down. But he is striving. His entire family, his kids, his grandkids are even working. And this is what makes this place unique. So I think the quality of life issues, handled carefully, slowly, and continuously, is what we have to work on. I don't know if Ramya sir can actually even throw light on this, but the commercialization is not a problem that we are talking about right now. It's something that we have been talking for 30, 40 years. Because yes, the character of the pole, the typology of the streets, they are not meant for this. And not only for the life or neighborhood quality, but even in terms of disaster risk, it's one of the biggest challenge. So maybe the buffer zone, if it was to relieve some of these activities, land use planning, local area plan, as Ashish said, we will have to look into what is proposed. But I'm sure all of these are parts of it.
I hope.
And the point is to look forward and look
Yeah.
forward to improvement, not just conservation or preservation of the thing, but it's the character of the people, I think.
But as you said, Khushi, every single building lost is a retarding
Yes,
of the overall.
that's
So-
the Eurocentric
Yeah.
notion that Gurmeet was talking about, which is
So we can afford to lose.
We can't afford to lose.
Okay.
But I would, as a observer of the city, I can say that we are losing the facades, the wooden facades and stuff. But when you go inside, if the building is still in use as a residence, the courtyard is there, the planning is there. So it's also like the responsiveness to the climate and the how do you say, the social networks and social cultural aspects, it remains till it remains a residence. The moment a residence is converted to a shop or a godown or an apartment building, that's the bigger loss. So even
I
the
think,
house form is very important, not just
I
the
think you're
physical.
absolutely right. The morphology is really where the life and the culture actually exists. It's not necessarily only in the facades. And point well taken. I want to just share with the panelists two questions that have been posed by conservation architect Ayushi Jangalwa. Ayushi has asked two somewhat related questions. One is the capacity building of conservation architects and artisans and the creation of awareness amongst the entire generation. um, are we making enough efforts to educate people at the school level? Because that's really where we need to begin. Our children being taught about the value of the heritage. That's one of our questions. The second one is, why are we not using city marketing techniques like influencers, travel influencers? Why aren't we getting them involved? I can never forget the example that used to be given by the former head of UNESCO, Minja Yang. She used to keep citing this example of being in Turkey, where they had to call a famous football player to come and actually talk about heritage and how important it is. Or I think he lives in a heritage home to get people more interested. So definitely, we need influencers of various kinds. But I want to put those questions out there to the panel. If any of you would like to respond to both these questions. Khushi, please go ahead.
I think Gurmeet, Ashish, all of us can respond to this. There's enough capacity as far as architecture is concerned. Except I, for the past, like from 2007, runs a course on conservation. And every year we have 15, 16 students pass out from CEP. There are lots of other architecture schools in India who are producing conservation architects. More than capacity building of architects, there is the entire ecosystem of conservation that needs upliftment. When a conservation architect goes to a homeowner, the homeowner is not interested in conservation per se as far as he gets his TDR. So in the old city, and Ashish can support me on this, we have contractors who are actually able to get through the TDR process in a way that an architect would not be able to manage. And that's why the owners go to these contractors and architects more. I mean, this is something controversial, but they become sort of a sub consultant to a contractor because managing work sites in the old city, bringing goods, bringing people, managing neighbors, this is all something. So not just the technical capacity in conservation. I think we need technical capacity building in managing work sites in complex context. And we need support. We need to create organizations, or even AMC can have something to support homeowners and professionals in this aspect. But capacity building for architects is not at all an issue in my knowledge, I'll say.
No, I think that's not true, because I'll tell you, we had two conservation architects positions, and Ramya said, "Do we have anybody right now on the post?" Most of the people left. I saw six conservation architects coming and leaving because they wanted to pursue their masters or PhD or something like that. It's a challenging task, and one needs to be at it. So I think that's one. Second is precisely for this reason, we actually entered into an MOU with the Gujarat Institute of Engineers and Architects, so that a pool of people, with young ones who are interested to work in this kind of environment, can get on a single platform. It becomes like a group of people working together, so that the challenges that they are facing can be faced together. Also, we did, whenever we did this EOI expression of interest, we never made competitive, financially competitive bids. So we never invited lowest quotations or selection on basis of financial turnover criteria. So we tried to make it much more conducive for the young professionals. And these challenges are there. I think the young generation of architects must take this up. That's what I say. Number one. Number two is, we have got a policy for internship with the trust. The corporation also has this register of artisans who can work in the old city. For them to make it more conducive, we need large numbers. So right now, from the 2060, so to 2693, 92 structures, 98 structures, sorry, 98 structures, we have got 80 structures which already got restored with the new policy. And I think that's not a big number to sustain these teams who are artisans or architects. So I think that's one of the challenges. But at the same time, I would also raise the concern that most of the new generation people are not kind of passionate enough to continue with the challenges.
Gurmeet, you have your hand.
I would like
Sorry,
to just,
Mr. Bhatt. Yeah.
So I would like to use this platform to tell all the audience members that we are looking for interns, and if you know, there is a Government of India portal called Tulip. So we've already advertised on that for 4 interns for Heritage Trust. So if anybody is interested, they can surely apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gurmeet, over to you.
Yeah. So I may sound at the risk of sounding a little cynical. One has seen this process, all that Khushi's been talking about, Ashish, all of us, that if we do the same thing, again, we will get the same results. And what we see out there is a result of what we've been doing. So if we continue the same way, we will get the same thing. And are we happy with what we are getting? I'm not, personally speaking. I wouldn't say that at the end of, after doing so many years of conservation work, I feel okay. I feel like patting myself on my back. Bada kuch ho gaya, bahut we've achieved. So my question really is, what I see today is, while we have to do business as usual, that we're talking about legislation karni hai, capacity building karni hai, flana karna hai, building restore karni hai, gir rahi hai, all of that is fine. But the point is, what is inspiring the human spirit here? Something which led to the creation of such beautiful work, such amazing cities, and like what Jagan said, very amazing. I mean, I think Khushi said, which I missed at that point, that would Ahmedabad or any of our historic cities have the same, that the newer part of it will have the same character or robustness if the historic part, the heart was not beating there. Now, the point is, how do you keep the heart going? If the heart is not going to be inspired, heart is not going to carry on. And what comes to my mind is that where is the love in the heart here? It's all about fork and knife and tools and plate and pans and all of that. That's what we're talking. Where are we being inspired? And what came to my mind? I mean, I'm going back to the studies of the students. The Parsis were dying, that people dying, it's not literally, but wanting engagement in their heritage, wanted to contribute. Spinning off from their personal legacy, the Parsis as a community has been major contributors. And I'm sure Ashish knows about them, Khushi knows about them, people in Ahmedabad know about them. Okay. For me, that was very, very inspiring. I saw the heartbeat there. Then when I saw the spine leading from the central road to that Haveli, Peshwa Haveli, and I saw those theaters there, I saw the possibility, and a little corner that hits and touches the edge of your riverfront. I saw a possibility of a cultural street, because it was all coming out of performing arts. I mean, I couldn't, even in Surat, I went for this Surat theatre festival where 500 amateur theatre, dramatists, actors are there. And they had this 3-day festival, and I decided to go and see one little bit. And those 350 people filled that theater. There were people waiting outside, almost getting violent because they wanted to get in for the next play inside. Where are we inspiring a cultural expression, the creative expressions in people, so that the walled city will come alive? The moment it comes alive, people will want to protect their fabric. But to say, fix your body and then the heart will beat, heart will not beat like that. If you fix the heart, the body will survive. And I think we need to find different answers. The problems are the same, but we need to look for answers elsewhere, not in the routine thing that we all have been practicing for a long time. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gurmeet. I think at this point, I should turn to Kirti Bhai, who has been patiently listening to us for 2 hours. Kirti Bhai, some thoughts from your side. A lot has been said. We've covered a lot of issues.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
No, first of all, of course, I must thank everyone who's here. I think, um, it's been very privileged to have you here, and 6, 7 people, I think, spend 2 hours discussing this whole subject, which is very complex. So thank you very much to everyone. But let me kind of make 2 or 3 observations. And it's a privilege not to be part of the panel in the sense that you could say things which you want to. Number one is this, that for a long time, for a very long time, I've known Ahmedabad and loved Wall City. Very young person, I used to go and stay in Raja Mehtani's pole at my Masha's place, Poparlal Dani. And ever since, my contact with the city is very alive. Even now, I go to city, even though I can't climb 4 stories of my friend's house in Ratanpur to fly kite, I still go to city on the kite flying day in order to be able to talk to people and listen to them. Now, let me tell you these 2 stories which I think are very important, need to be told. Number one is this, that I've talked to a large number of people over a period of time, before and after the heritage thing. And believe me, that the kind of message I get is this, that people are not very happy. Second message I get is, even though there is a heritage status, people are not very proud. And people do not consider themselves privileged that such a thing has happened. Now, it's very likely that I'm talking to wrong people. But I have been working on people for the last 50, 60 years, and I understand what people is all about. And I do get these messages very, very clearly. Whether they're correct or not is not very important. What is very important are the messages that I get. Let me compare these messages with the messages that I get in Penang. In the last 5 years, I've been to Penang 3 times. And I spent huge amount of time walking, talking to people. And it's entirely different ball game, believe me. Kind of response that you get from people from Penang in terms of what heritage city is all about, why they feel proud about, and whether you talk to, I think, Machiwala at one end, or whether you talk to the person who runs a boutique hotel, or you talk to, I think, student, you get a very different messages. And I think this is a concern which I would like to kind of share, that this is something very important to whatever the experts and the architects and facades and the buildings and FSI. This is a very important yardstick we should examine. This is number one. Number two is this, that as a matter of fact, I love terraces of the walled city more than the walled city itself, in the sense that, and it's a huge asset of the city. And I just, as a matter of fact, this Uttarayan, after Uttarayan, I read a small little kind of thing for a newspaper, in which I said I'm very worried about losing kite flying spaces, in Ahmedabad. I think more and more places where I used to fly kites are beginning to disappear because large number of buildings are coming up and you can't really kind of... So I said, is there a way to look at the city from the point of view of a kite flying? I thought kite flying is a very important cultural thing. Kite flying is something which has given a very, very special status to Ahmedabad. And I think we need to look into that. So that's the second important point that I would like to make. The third point is the time element. And I am very apologetic that I did this. As a matter of fact, the motivation to organize these 2 webinars essentially coming from a news item which I saw in a Gujarati newspaper. And I admit
That's not very important how many people, how many foreigners visit. But the fact remains that a Gujarati newspaper carried in a three-column space that Ahmedabad Heritage City had received 976 visitors in the whole year. And because I was very curious, and I know Penang, I examined, I looked into Google and found out at the same time, for the same period, 7.6 million tourists had walked into hotels of Penang. Now, 976 would be bogus. It could be 10,000, 12,000, 50,000. I'm not really concerned. But I'm really concerned it's a huge gap of 7.6 and 976. As a matter of fact, that article 976 gives lots of information, how many people, how many months. And even if you grant that, and as Ashish said, that it's not very important how many people visit, foreigners visit, but still it is some yardstick. So point that I'm trying to make is this, and that is why the title of this webinar series is Setting an Action Agenda. And setting an action agenda is very important. And I think that should include municipal corporation, that should include government of Gujarat, that should include government of India. Prime Minister happened to be Gujarati, and that should include, I think, stakeholders. And I personally feel, I could be wrong, and this is the first of the two webinar series. The second one takes place on 2nd. Even though it's a meaningless, even though it has no purpose, I would like this 15, 20 people who got together to put together a 5-page white paper into what do we do with Ahmedabad's heritage status. I'm not really thrilled with what is happening, and I could be wrong, and I could be pessimistic, and I'm 83 years old, but I'm not. That is how I'm doing 122nd webinar, because I believe in cities, and I believe the city is the future of this country. But I think something more has to happen. I think there's a greater need to, because I think we go listing problems into the why it cannot be done. Of course, there are problems. And of course, it's difficult to move this way or that way. But you have to move. Very fact, this is the first heritage city of the country of this size. And 8,970 cities, and this is one of them. And we are just talking about 5 kilometers, 5 square kilometer area, and 480,000 people. So my small little message, if there could be a message, is this: that all the analysis that we have, all the wisdom that we have, should lead to very solid action plan, and that too in a time-bound manner. We are in a very different age. Resources, I think, is not an issue. Just read today that Ahmedabad city is going to spend 1,000 crores on extension of the riverfront. And one is talking about thousands and thousands of crore rupees for the city in the context of preparing for the Olympics. Compared to all that, I think looking at and doing something with heritage city is not a small task, and I think we've got to address ourselves to doing it. And all the people who see sitting here are capable of major contributions in terms of how could it happen. So that's what I'm.
Thank you, Kirti, for Thank you for affirming that we can do something. Maybe we should take up this challenge. I'm not sure who will curate this document, but I'd be happy to write a little bit about what to me is the big challenge, which is to tell Ahmedabadis that 1%, less than 1% of your area is what you need to find a way to to not preserve, to revitalize. Especially think of the Olympics. I think we need to galvanize everybody who lives in Ahmedabad. Everything is kind of available, as Khushi put it. It's a school of urbanism. They're all there. Everybody's there. The investors are also there in Ahmedabad, and as you said, lots of thousands of crores will be poured into the city. Can we not focus everybody's attention that this 1% of the area requires special attention? So that's a great suggestion. Kirtibhai, I want to I know we are already past 8 p.m., but if I can ask each one of the panelists to share just in 30 seconds, one thought which can contribute to what Kirtibhai is saying, which is what should we work on? What should be our action agenda? Just a quick single line thought. If it's a repetition of what you've said before, that's fine. Let's start with Gurmeet. Over to you.
I think it's important I think what we should be doing is identify those triggers, those catalysts for change.
Okay.
Very strategic point of interventions, which would then, give that energy to that space.
Absolutely. Triggers and catalysts. Ashish, I'm just seeing on the screen who's next. Ashish, over to you.
Yeah, I think yes, I can hear you, and I think very aptly said, Kirtibhai. I think very interestingly he pointed out the way in which city is actually committing to go forward. This is not an area where I think that will be easy to go forward typically. So you need to find out that special way in which this can happen, and if to do that we need much bigger task force. Be it, I think so. Be it. Let there be hundreds of conservation architects. Let there be hundreds of planners, developers, contractors, artisans, thousands of artisans maybe. But if that is the need of the hour, let's do that. I think that's what I would say. Secondly, we also don't need to forget the fact that this is not a city of tourism. This is a city of socio-economic continuity, and we need to focus on first aspect, which is make it livable, make it good for businesses. Only then it will be good to the eyes of people. So the heart, as Gurmeet said, is in the social economic context, not in the architecture.
Great. Thanks, Ashish. Khushi?
Yeah, I'll second both my seniors here, and it's about finding the balance, specifically in land use, because what makes a living heritage city is the people in it. So really the balance between the activities that are there, between what makes pole a pole, because we do not want families like Jagdip Mehta Bhai's family to actually be frustrated and leave. The pride will come when we will respect people who live there. So,
Thank you, Khushi. જગદીપ ભાઈ, મને ખબર નથી તમે કેટલી બધી ચીજો બધી સમજી છે કે નહીં, પણ તમે સાંભળ્યું તો છે, એટલે તમારા ફાઇનલ વિચારો, કઈ એક ચીજ કરવાથી આપણે બદલાવ આવી શકે? તમે મ્યુટ ઉપર, જગદીપ ભાઈ, તમારો માઇક મ્યુટ છે.
હા, ફાઇનલ વિચાર એવો છે કે આપણે જે પોળ છે એ પોળની જગ્યાએ મોલ ના બને, બસ એ જોવાની જરૂર છે. એઝ પર એક્ઝામ્પલ પાડાની પોળ, તો ભવિષ્યમાં એ પાડાનો મોલ થઈ જાય, એવું ના થાય, એ જોવાની જવાબદારી છે.
ઓકે, થેન્ક યુ. અને લાસ્ટમાં, if I can invite Mr. Bhatt, I think he's on the call. Bhatt Sahib, can I leave the last word for you? What do you think you can do to make this all happen, please? Bhatt Sahib, can you hear me? Yeah, you're audible. Hello, Mr. Bhatt, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think he seems to have a problem with his
Okay.
Wi-Fi.
That's a pity. Okay, I think then we'll close it here. Hopefully we can present a manifesto or something to Mr. Bhatt, who is clearly an ally within the municipal corporation. So there are some good elements here and lots of hopeful openings. So with that, let me thank everybody who has joined us for this panel. Thank you, Kirtibai, for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. It was really wonderful to revive our interest in the soul and the
Yeah, we lost Jagan as well. Okay, so I think even Jagan, we have lost him. And so once again, let me thank everyone for this wonderful conversation and remarkably interesting ideas. And let me remind you that the second one of this webinar series on the same subject takes place on 2nd of April at same time, 6 o'clock. And if you could make it, or if you could suggest people to join, it will be great help. Thank you very much. And all the
Thank
best
you, sir.
for the Gurmeet, thank you very much, staying all the way for the whole hour. Khushi, very much, for thank you very much for your delightful presentation. Ashish Bhai, જરા મળીએ અને વાતો કરીએ કે શું થઈ શકે આથી આમાં અહીંયા. Ramya Saab, thank you very much that you stayed back. In fact, I was very worried when I heard that you may not be able to join, and very fact that you could join will be a big help. And Jagdish Bhai, તમારું ઘર જોવા માટે જલ્દી આવીશું અને thank
મોસ્ટ
you very
વેલકમ.
much.
બધા જરૂરથી આવો, અમને આનંદ થશે.
જરૂર આવો, જરૂર. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.